Thank you for joining us again. We're spending this week in that chapter from Paul, writing to the Romans, chapter 12. Paul's really talking about our response to what he's outlined before, the great news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And Paul's saying, look, in the light of that gospel, of what God has done through Jesus, this is how you should live your lives. This is how it should show in your lives. It's a free gift from God that should transform us, transform our minds, and that work through into our actions, the way we live. Back in Romans chapter 5, Paul says this. He says, you see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. God, Father, Son, and Spirit loved us. That is why the Son came from heaven. Jesus came to earth and allowed himself to go to the cross because we were loved. Now, love is, as we've talked about before, just one of those most overused words in our language. And sadly, we cheapen it, don't we? In the same conversation, we can talk about our love for a particular chocolate bar, and we can also talk about our love for our children. Presumably, one is greater than the other, I hope. For Paul, love is a word of great power. It's full of emotion, but it's also full of practical action. Love is not just a sentimental feeling without any consequences. For God, love meant a great sacrifice. It meant laying down a life, giving everything for that love. And so it's no wonder when Paul comes to talk about our response to the gospel that's been born out of God's love for us, that we are to live a life of love, practically outworking love in our lives. That's a central part of his instruction in this in this letter, the letter to the Romans, but of course in others, particularly we think of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, of course. Well, we're going to read from Romans chapter 12, verses 9 through to 13. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in love. Honour one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervour serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. And share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. So here Paul starts with this line, love must be sincere. Like we said just now, we can kind of bandy the love word around easily, can't we? We can love a TV programme and we can love a person. The words I love you are easy to say to someone and can be just thrown out very casually without any real meaning. We can even use love to manipulate others. If we say we love someone, perhaps they'll do what we want them to do for us. But God's love is perfect and sincere. It's backed up with action. A love that is self-giving, a love that is not self-serving. Well, it'd be good for us to examine ourselves. How do we use the word love? And when we say we love someone, are we tying that in with imitating God's perfect and sincere love for us? Paul goes on to say, be devoted to one another in love. Be devoted to one another in love. Well, we've talked about this before when we've looked at other passages, and we see this devotion to one another in the early Acts church. Luke writes there that the believers were devoted to prayer and to worship and to study and to also to serving one another, to showing that love for one another. That's why others were attracted to their community. They could see this palpable display of genuine love that made them an attractive community of love. Our devotion to one another, according to Jesus, is in fact a marker that we are really his followers. How are we devoted to one another? And are we just devoted to those we like, those that we agree with? How about those in our church community, our community of faith that we struggle with, that we don't see eye to eye with? And we're to share with the Lord's people. We're to practice hospitality, and we're to serve the Lord, to be joyful and patient and faithful in our prayers. In the words of Paul in his great chapter on love from 1 Corinthians 13, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy, can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, if I have faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Our practical serving of the Lord of each other, our prayers, our hospitality, if it's not all born out of love, genuine, sincere love, then according to Paul, they're just a noisy irrelevance. This is incredibly challenging, isn't it? But if love is God's motivation for saving us, then selfless love has to be our motivation for serving him and for serving each other. We must live a life of love in word and in deed. May God bless us as we think about that challenge, and as we think about how we use the word love and how we show the love to those around us. Amen.
A new command you gave to us, love one another. As you have loved us, so we must love one another. And this will show